The alarm in the hatching hall screamed before I even reached the door, and my claws skidded on the stone floor as I turned the corner. Something was wrong with the newest clutch. I could smell the fear in the air, thick and metallic, before I saw a single egg. My name is Vrashkth. I am a warden of the coiling spire, keeper of eggs older than most stars the humans have named. I have seen 400 hatchings. I have never once run toward one in fear. That night, I ran. Inside the hall, 3 healers stood frozen around a cracked shell, and I understood why the moment I looked closer. The hatchling inside was wrong. Its wing had folded in on itself instead of spreading. Its spine curved sharply to one side. One eye was gold, bright and searching. The other was pale and empty, seeing nothing at all. By our law, such a creature is not killed. We are not monsters, whatever the old stories say about us, but it is not named either. It is carried to the discard alcove, fed just enough to live, and left there, forgotten, until age or misfortune finishes what its birth began. I told myself this was simply how things were done. I had told myself that for 400 hatchings. But something about this one small, shaking creature made the words feel hollow in my mouth for the first time in my long life. I did not know then that a child from another world was about to prove me right to doubt them. The human delegation arrived 3 days later, and the entire spire buzzed with tension. No one wanted to name out loud. Humans were still new to us, still strange, still a puzzle none of my kind had solved. They had no claws worth fearing, no fire in their blood, no armor on their skin, and yet they had fought their way to a seat at the great compact table through nothing but stubborn refusal to be ignored. We respected that. We did not yet trust it. Among the ministers and translators and quiet, watchful guards was one small human who was not supposed to be there at all. Her mother led the trade talks. The girl herself was only 6 years old, and she was told, very clearly, to remain in the guest quarters at all times. She did not remain in the guest quarters. I found her on the second day, sitting on the cold floor of the discard alcove, and my hearts nearly stopped. She had the ruined hatchling curled across her lap, its crooked wing resting under her small hand, and it was not struggling, it was not flinching, it was leaning into her touch, the way no discarded hatchling had ever leaned into anything. I crossed the alcove faster than dignity allowed. "You should not be here," I said, in the flat trade tongue we used with outsiders. "That creature is dangerous. It could harm you." She looked up at me without a trace of fear, which unsettled me more than any threat could have. "He wasn't gonna hurt me," she said. "He was crying. Do dragons cry?" "They do not," I said, though even as I said it, doubt curled somewhere behind my ribs. "Well, he was making the crying sound," she said, stroking the crumpled wing gently. The hatchling made a low sound in its throat, something I had never once heard from it before, something almost content. "He's so cute. Look at his little face. He looks worried all the time." I did not have a word in my own language for what that word did to me. We have words for beautiful, for magnificent, for powerful. We do not have a word for finding something broken and wanting it anyway, wanting it more because it is broken. "That creature has no name," I told her, sharper than I meant to. "It will not be given one. It will never fly. It will never hold rank among its kind. There is no purpose in caring for it." "He doesn't need a purpose," she said, with the flat, unshakable certainty that only the very young can manage. "I'm calling him Milo, because of his eye. Is that okay, Milo?" The hatchling pressed its crooked snout into her palm as though it understood every word. I told myself I would remove her at once. Instead, I stood there far longer than I should have, simply watching, unable to look away. Her name, I learned later, was Elsie, and her mother apologized to me twice over the following days, with the tired patience of a parent whose child had decided something and could not be talked out of it. I told her, honestly, that no harm was being done. I did not tell her that I had already begun watching the alcove doorway each morning, waiting for the small shape that would appear in it. Milo changed with every visit. The wing did not heal, nothing heals a birth flaw, but the creature that had spent its short life curled tight and silent began to unfold, slowly, like something remembering it was allowed to exist. It began following the sound of Elsie's voice from across the alcove. It ate eagerly for the first time in its life. Our healer, checking on it during the 5th visit, made a small startled sound and told me its heart had settled into a steady, calm rhythm she had never once recorded in a discarded hatchling before. "They do better with attention," she murmured, almost to herself, staring at her own readings as though they had betrayed her. "We always assumed that. We simply never gave any of them the chance to prove it." I said nothing, because I had no argument left to offer her. On the final day of the summit, Elsie cried harder than Milo ever had. She held him against her chest and told him, through the small device that translated her words, that she would come back, that he had to wait for her, that he was the best dragon in the entire spire, no matter what anyone else said. I stood in the doorway and did not stop her from making a promise no 6-year-old should have had the power to keep. She kept it anyway. 8 months passed before the delegation returned, and I confess I did not expect to see the girl again. Children forget quickly, I told myself. Distance and time erase small attachments easily. I was wrong about that too. Elsie arrived clutching a data slate covered edge to edge in careful, determined handwriting, translated into rough but readable script. She had spent every one of those 8 months asking every scientist her mother's staff could find about creatures like Milo, about why they were discarded, about whether it could ever be different. She was 6 years old, and she had built an argument with the patience of someone twice her age, and she carried it straight into the meeting hall of the Spire's ruling council. I watched her stand before elders far older than her entire species had existed, her small hand resting on Milo's crooked wing the whole time, and she did not falter once. The council did not change the law that day. Old customs do not bend easily, not even for a child's certainty, however fierce. But something in me had already bent, and it did not bend back. I began keeping records after that, quietly, on my own, the way no warden before me ever had. Heart patterns, feeding habits, the small, unlogged proof that a discarded creature given a reason to live could become something entirely different from what our old laws assumed. I told myself I was simply curious. I knew, even then, that curiosity was not the whole truth. Word of the records spread slowly through the spire, the way water spreads through cracked stone, finding every gap it can. Some wardens dismissed them outright. Others, quieter ones, began asking questions they had never thought to ask before. 3 years after that first summit, the law changed. The old custom of discarding flawed hatchlings was struck from the Spire's ancient books, and it was my careful records that the reformers held up as proof, and it was one small, stubborn human voice I heard in my own memory the entire time I compiled them. Milo flies now. Badly, unevenly, never far or fast, but he flies. On a wing our healers finally understood how to strengthen, once we stopped assuming flawed meant worthless. By any strict measure, he remains the least graceful dragon the Spire has ever produced. Elsie visits whenever her family's work allows it. She is 14 now, taller each time I see her, and she still calls him cute without a hint of embarrassment, and he still presses his crooked snout into her palm as though nothing else in the galaxy could possibly matter more. I do not fully understand a species that looks at the very worst thing my own kind can produce and simply decides to love it anyway. I stopped trying to see it as a flaw in them long ago. I have started to wonder, instead, whether it was always a flaw in us, one that took a 6-year-old girl and a broken hatchling to finally show me. Some nights, when the Spire is quiet and the younger wardens have gone to rest, I walk past the old discard alcove out of habit, though it has not been used for its old purpose in years. I think about how close Milo came to living out a short, forgotten life in that cold stone room, unseen and unnamed, simply because he was born imperfect. I think about how one small human, with no claws and no fire, and no power any elder of my kind would have respected, walked into that alcove without fear and changed everything with a single word. Cute, she called him. A word we never had. A word we needed more than we ever knew. I am old enough now to admit that the greatest lesson of my long life did not come from any council, any elder, or any ancient text passed down through generations of my kind. It came from a child half my height, from a world we barely understood, who looked at the most broken creature in our entire spire and saw something worth loving. I carry that lesson with me still, every single day, and I suspect I always will.